Hello, and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with Jeffrey Poole and Joe Lalo, as usual. And we have a great guest for you this week, Patrice Fitzgerald. She's an author, but she's also producing a lot of anthologies right now, and I believe she's making a little bit of money doing that. So we're going to ask her how, I think most of the time with anthologies, they're kind of a for the love type of thing where you don't necessarily make money, especially if you're actually paying your author. So we're going to ask her about that and her own experiences and her own work, of course. Let me go ahead and read her bio real quick. Patrice is the best-selling author of a number of books and short stories, primarily in the science fiction and speculative fiction realms. She's the series editor for Beyond the Stars, Beyond the Stars space opera anthologies, as well as the new Mostly Murder mystery anthology series. She's an attorney with a background in intellectual property. She heads a boutique publishing company featuring mystery, romance, fantasy, and nonfiction books. In her spare time, she's a singer, performing jazz, Broadway, and opera with her husband. She's got a piano behind her if you have the video on, and she offered to sing for us. So maybe at the end we can get a sample. But she currently lives on the water in New England, and is thrilled to be making a living as a writer. Welcome, Patrice.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. That's quite the introduction. Did I write it myself?
Does it sound familiar? I may have found it on Amazon.
Yeah, it makes me sound pretty darn impressive. I should tell you the secret is that I don't pay anybody. That's why I make money on these. No, it's not true. I don't want to give it all away right away.
All right. Well, before we jump into the anthology stuff, why don't you tell us about how you went from being an attorney to an author and a publisher?
Well, I was an English major in college, and I had always wanted to write. I think that I bumped into the sort of adolescent idea of, oh, that's difficult. And I think I thought mostly men did it, although I had read a lot of women writers. I don't know that I knew they were women. I was confused about the gender of the person who wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, for example. So I went to law school and enjoyed practicing law for about 15 years, but I always was writing on the side, and then I decided to get serious about it. And when I did, it took me a couple of decades to actually be publishing. I was doing freelance writing for magazines, newspapers, and then eventually online sites. But when self-publishing became a thing, I said, I will just start and do this myself. And so my first book was published on Independence Day in 2011, which means I've been at this for 5+ years. And I've kind of grown up with the indie writing and self-publishing business. And now it is my business. And as you mentioned, I'm pretty diversified. I have a couple of full-length books of my own out there, as well as some short stories. And I publish other people, and now I'm doing these anthologies as well.
Nice. And did you start out submitting to other people's anthologies, or what made you kind of decide, oh, I'll just start doing some anthologies?
Well, I had seen that Hugh Howey of Wool fame was allowing people to write in his universe. And of course, there had always been fan fiction, but usually you didn't get paid for fan fiction. So I was intrigued by that and kind of thrilled that I could write as part of that. So I wrote one short story, and that became the beginning of a series, and I put those collected books together. And then I was part of a group that was going to put together a wool anthology, and I ended up going in a little bit of a different direction. But people asked me, that was really where it started. People asked me to be in anthologies. And Sam Peralta, in particular, Samuel Peralta, whom you might have seen with his many, his are called the Chronicles anthologies with various names, the Robot Chronicles, the Alien Chronicles, the AI Chronicles. And then he's gone on to do other things as well, but he has a number of irons in the fire there. And after I was in, I guess I've been in 4 that have been published, and I have 2 more going forward with him, I said, hey, I'm going to do this myself, because I thought it would be fun and perhaps also lucrative. And it is both fun and somewhat lucrative.
Excellent. I've actually seen a lot of anthologies that have come out and not really sold very well. We're going to ask you kind of in the second half more about marketing and how you're actually selling the books. But did you know going in, did you think, oh, maybe we could actually make a little money and I can pay the authors and it will do well? Or I assume you're paying the authors, but
I am indeed paying the authors. I did think that we could make some money, and that was mostly based on Sam's model. I have to say that the first anthology that I produced, which was the first of the Beyond the Stars series, and it was in fact called Dark Beyond the Stars, um, was something that I put together with a bunch of friends, and all of those friends happened to be women. And we didn't think too much about that. We just thought this will be cool and a little interesting bit. Um, and one writer over in the UK happened to come across it, and I guess he didn't like the collection, and he wrote a rather scathing review on Amazon, and which would have been fine. You know, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but he said that women can't write science fiction, and ladies, you should leave it to the blokes, or something along those lines. And we were, of course, rather incensed by that. And he got some pushback in the comments. And then Amazon removed the comments in response to his review. And we complained to them that that wasn't fair, because in his review, he sort of singled out our gender, which didn't seem fair. But he also plugged his own book at the end. So, and that's against their guidelines. And that got the attention of some people in the internet, in the sphere out there, the big social networking sphere, including, or what was it? It wasn't IO9. It was one of the, I can't remember, but one of the sites where they sort of call attention to these things. Maybe it was IO9. I'm not sure. And so he got a lot of pushback, and we got, I don't know, at this point we have 100 or something comments on that review. And a lot of people bought the book because they wanted to tell him, hey, women can write sci-fi and this is silly. And that sort of was our launch. We couldn't have planned it, but I thank that man in the UK who did us the favor of writing that nasty review and sort of calling out his own sexism. So that was the beginning of the series. And then we've done two more, and I'm working on a fourth right now. And the whole series is called Beyond the Stars.
all right. Yeah, I actually remember that maybe a year or two ago. I think the passive guy, passivevoice.com blog mentioned it too. And
That's right, he did. Yes, and that caused a little bit of controversy there, because some people, well, these things can be politicized. Let's leave it at that.
yeah, I heard you're letting boys into the series now.
Yes, but they have to, pass the cootie test.
All right. Do they have to wear a skirt for the author photo?
I hadn't thought of that, but that's an idea. Who would know, though? It's usually only from the
That's
shoulders
true.
up.
We'll have to imagine it.
Yes.
Do you think have you published the first mystery one yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. In,
Do you feel that science fiction is very welcoming to the short stories? Or, I always feel like people want novels, even though everybody keeps saying like, oh, everybody's so busy these days. Shorter fiction is where it's at. But with my stuff, the novels sell way better than the short stories and novellas.
in my experience, novels do sell better, for sure. Um, but science fiction, I think, is sort of uniquely friendly to the short story, starting way before the age of self-publishing. Um, the magazines that go back to the 50s were made short fiction very popular in sci-fi realms. And because you create this little world, and it can be very cool to create this world in a short space. It gives you that many more opportunities to world build. And when you think about Ray Bradbury and Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke, Heinlein not as much, I think, but some of the greats, oldies of science fiction, always wrote short fiction, both for these pulp magazines and in their own collections. And I enjoy it. I think it's sort of a tremendous way to flesh out an idea, but you don't have to spend 80,000 or 100,000 words and 6 months or whatever writing it.
And do you find that, have you done themes at all, or is it just kind of space adventures, or is
We
it just
don't,
general science fiction?
for me, the ones that I've done so far, I just say space opera, very broad, because I like to leave it wide open for the authors, and I like um, the variety that you get. Because if you say space opera, it's pretty much anything that doesn't take place exclusively on Earth. I mean, I'm very general about it, so that there's you can have first encounters, and you can have military sci-fi, and you can have aliens, and you can have post-apocalyptic stuff. It just leaves it wide open, and I've been so thrilled with the stories that we have gotten.
Awesome. And even though we're the sci-fi fantasy show, I'm curious about the mysteries. Do people have a hard time killing someone and solving the mystery in like 8,000 words or less, or is it
Well,
a challenge?
I think it's kind of a challenge, but it's the same sort of thing. Short stories, which I write myself and I'm very attracted to, are an opportunity to take an idea and maybe just one little conflict that would not be enough to carry a whole novel. So you can take that sort of slim read of an idea and really hype it up, and I mean, my window right now for these stories is usually 4,000 to 8,000 words, but I'm flexible on that. We have a couple in the new mystery book that are very short, and they can just be wonderful. It's similar because short stories in the mystery genre have been around for a long time, but I would say that you're probably, well, let me let you ask the questions. I have so many things to tell you, but carry on.
All right. Well, I was just going to ask, are you doing, for those out there that may be thinking they want to put one together themselves, are you paying the authors a flat fee, or are you doing a royalty share kind of deal?
I'm definitely not doing a royalty share. I have not done that, and I don't plan to do it. For me, it's the accounting would be difficult, and I'm not interested in getting into that for years on end. Hopefully it sells for years on end. I do have a couple of different models, but in general, I vary between a kind of a 5 cents a word with a cap on it, or just a flat fee. And it depends upon what the traffic will bear and how well I think that the volume will do. The money is not the main attraction for the writer, in my experience. They value the exposure and the prestige to be in being associated with some very well-known authors. I'm going to hold up some books if that's okay. Plugging a little bit here. This is
Sure.
the most recent sci-fi one. This is Beyond the Stars. I have to look at it, At Galaxy's Edge. That one came out in August. I always try to put a book out on my birthday. And that one happens to have big names include Michael Anderle, who is a super successful and relatively new sci-fi author. And he writes wild stuff. And he indeed wrote a wild story for this. Let's see. Another pretty big name is Nick Webb, who has had great success recently. We also have some newcomers that wrote beautiful stories. Anthea Sharp, she's not a newcomer, but G.S. Jensen. And then here is, I love my covers. These are Julie Dillon covers, and she's a Hugo Award winner. So I think that's maybe why I keep doing it. They're kind of expensive, but I keep spending the money because I love those covers. This is Beyond the Stars, A Planet Too Far. And this one has Annie Bellet and Elle Casey, Anne Christie, Sam Peralta, and Nick Webb again. So, we've got some big names, and that helps boost the numbers and the ranking and the exposure.
Yeah, definitely. We've had a number of those people on the show. So
Yeah,
I try to go through and find the people who are selling well so we can milk them for their secrets for everyone.
absolutely. Now, this is the Mostly Murder Till Death. It's called These. I don't know if you can see it. These are going to have themes. And I kind of stepped into the shoes of someone else who had started producing this. So Till Death means that this one is about couples who kill, as we say. And our big name author in this one, whom we were thrilled to get, is Lawrence Block. I don't know if you know mysteries, but he's been writing mystery for 50 years, and he's literally a grand master of the mystery genre. We have other pretty well-known people, J.C. Andrzejewski, Josh Hayes, Ann Kelleher, Geraldine Dufresne, who writes cozy mysteries. She actually writes for me. So H.B. Moore, Heather Moore. So a lot of people who help kind of lift the boat for those people who are less well known. And it's been a success. So it's cool.
Definitely. And I think maybe that's one of the things that I haven't seen with the ones that don't sell that well, is that they're just open to submissions. And because of that, it's not, most of the people who are making a living as authors aren't going out there looking to make $100 or $200 from a short story. So how did you go about approaching people? I assume you approached them to get some of the bigger names out there in the anthologies.
Yes, as I said, the very first space opera one, which is Dark Beyond the Stars, I have to remind myself of the title sometimes, was just a group of friends, and some of them were pretty well known. Jen Fainer Wells was in that first one. Who else? A big name is Blair Babylon and Autumn Kalquist, Susan K. Quinn, Risa Walker, Sarah Rain, big, really well-known people who just happen to be my friends. But after that one, I did kind of a different model. I do tap some people that I know both have, good exposure and a pretty well-known name, but also are good writers. So because, you're balancing sort of the prestige or the marquee factor with good stories. And of course, the prestige authors you also know you can count on for a story. But if you invite somebody, you are relying on them to turn in a good story. And then the submissions usually fill out about the other half of the book. And I've been very pleased with the submissions that I've gotten. In fact, the last, At Galaxy's Edge, the last space opera anthology, we probably got, I don't know, maybe as many as 50 submissions for about 6 slots. And as I was reading them, I was kind of ranking them, and I have a second reader who helps me with that. And I was seeing some good stories, and I thought, okay, this is good with a few tweaks. And then toward the deadline, I got like 10 at the end that were all like, 10s. And I thought, how can I decide? But what an exciting problem to have just tremendous short stories, especially from people that I didn't know and might not necessarily be big names. But so that's what you do, or that's what I do. I balance out the names that will help sell the book and who also, one presumes, will write brilliant stories, and they do, and lesser known people who have shown us something really excellent. And that helps expand their notoriety. And these are the people that, 3 and 4 years ago, when I was first writing my wool story that became a collection, that's Karma of the Silo. There were a lot of people that I worked with that were just brand new, and now they're pretty well known in science fiction circles. So that's how it happens. You write for a few years and you either sink or swim, and most people seem to swim pretty well.
Awesome. Do you find any challenges with choosing like your 6 when you had 50 or 60 submissions? Is it just kind of gut instinct what you think will fit the collection best?
It is. It's hard to decide, and it's just so exciting to hear from these new voices. The first story at Galaxy's Edge is called The Good Food, and I just love that story. I don't want to give it away, but it's a man landing on a planet. So there you go. And he has a dog with him. And I think that story is so excellent. I hope it's going to win an award. There are a number of stories in these that I think should win awards, and they don't always get the attention of the right people. We do submit them to Best Science Fiction and Fantasy Stories of the Year which John Joseph Adams is the editor for. And but he reads thousands of stories, so it's hard to stand out in that pack. But I think that it is hard to decide, but usually when there's something that's so excellent, sorry, that was my computer doing something that's so excellent, you can't resist it, and you say, oh, I got to put this one in. Yeah.
All right, cool. Last question for me for this segment. How are you going about advertising or promoting that you're open for submissions? Are you putting them out there in the writers market sites or just on your own website?
I have my main playground area is Facebook. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but that's where I ended up. I'm not so much on Twitter. I have a website, but it's a little bit, I don't get there all that often. So on Facebook, I have a group that's called Beyond the Stars, a space opera anthology or space opera anthology series or whatever I called it. And that's where we sort of congregate. And I let people know about it, and they spread the word. It kind of gets out to the community, and that's good because I don't want 500 submissions, and because I don't charge. Some people do, but if I don't charge, having 50 or 60 is plenty, and it continues to expand. And then for the mystery anthology, I have a group called the Mystery Collective. I mean, I say I have. It exists. I didn't even set that second one up, but that's how we spread the word, and people tell their fellow writers, and it gets around. So I don't have any problem letting people know that they can submit to these things.
All right, sounds good. Well, let me let the guys talk a little bit. They they like to chat now and then.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay, my first question is, why didn't I mute when I cleared my throat just then? My second question, when you're putting together an anthology, how standalone do you feel the story should be? Should they tell a complete encapsulated story, or do you feel side stories and add-ons to existing series are okay?
It's not me that minds. Readers who don't know the bigger story and perhaps don't know the author seem to mention in their reviews that they're not happy if it's just, well, you can have a beautiful story that is related to something else, but does literally stand alone and is complete in and of itself and highly entertaining. But if you have something that seems like some little tail end of something, people can be annoyed. On the other hand, that writer's fans can be thrilled to have some little snippet that didn't make it into the bigger volume or the bigger series. So it kind of cuts both ways. And just like anything else, you judge on the basis of the story. Many times I will read something and it is part of another series, but I haven't read the rest of the series or the book. And so if it satisfies me and it seems entertaining and complete in and of itself, then I'm cool with that.
Yeah, that makes sense. It feels like there are a handful of things, like I'm blanking on movies where this is the case, but like where you can watch a film having never seen any of the other series and enjoy it, but if you've seen the rest of the series, and becomes infinitely better because every single line has some additional significance. So I guess it's like any other thing where if it's done well, then you can do it any way you wish.
Yeah, I think that's true.
My second question is, are previously written short stories worth pursuing and including? Like, I mean, obviously lots of these follow themes, so you'd have to have, by happenstance written something that fits the theme, but do you bar previously existing stories, or can they be submitted?
I have accepted and printed and included reprints, we call them. Again, it's probably not my preference, because you want to be able to say, hot, new, exciting, fresh off the presses stories. But sometimes an author, especially an invited author, may be up against a deadline with something else, or just a story doesn't gel, even when they intend to write a brand new story. And then we have to get moving with the process, and they'll say, well, I have this great one that didn't get a lot of exposure, or I just think it's my best, and then I may include it. But I think there's only been one for each of the anthologies that I've been in. For example, in the Mostly Murder Till Death, anthology. Lawrence Block's story is a reprint, but it was in Ellery Queen in, I think, 1986 or something. So the chances of someone having already read it are slim. And even if they have, it's a great story. So.
Yeah, that's the thing about short fiction particularly. It seems like it can withstand multiple readings a lot better than long stories.
I think that's true. And of course, it takes less time. So you can be halfway through the story before you're like, wait a minute, have I read this one already?
Yeah. All right, just one more question for this part. But when you're assembling an anthology, do you establish the order of the stories beforehand, or do you shuffle things around to try to create smoother transitions of tone and content?
That's an interesting question. Um, I don't plan the order beforehand. I don't try for a smooth transition. Perhaps I should. I try for high contrast. That's kind of been my, maybe I take that from my singing career, where if you have a singer who's doing 3 songs, you know, you tend to have a lively one, and then a more lyrical, slow one, and then kind of a funny one at the end, you know, for example. So I like the variety. And I found that in the murder mystery series, for example, I was doing, at first I was trying for, because we had couples in these. They weren't always married couples, but they were couples of one sort or another. I tried to make the bad guy or bad girl the opposite gender each time. I'd have like the evil one be the man and then the evil one be the woman. I'm not sure anybody else noticed that. I'm not even sure I stayed with that pattern throughout. But mostly, and as I mentioned, I did have a couple of real short ones, so I contrasted them with the longer ones. I would say lighter versus darker in tone for the mysteries, and for the space opera short stories, yeah, contrast mostly. You know, some stories you have a feel about them. Some are quieter and some are more riotous and more explosions. And I might put a military sci-fi up against a sort of a dreamy, you know, more psychological story. That's the way I do it. Who knows how other people do it, but that's the way I do it.
Yeah, contrast actually makes a lot of sense, because if you handle contrast correctly, then every story will sort of stick out to the reader at the time that they read it, as opposed to potentially sort of flowing one into the other, which might be another interesting way to read a story, but won't allow you to really stick with an individual story as well.
Well, the other thing that happens if someone doesn't like a particular story and they're like, oh, this is stupid, and they flip to the next one. I say flip or page to the next one, you know. They might then like the next because it's going to be different. The other thing I didn't mention is that I always try to start with a very strong story, and I try to work it so that, you know how, at least on Amazon, you get 10% sample, and many times people download a sample, or at least I do, to see if I'll buy a book. So I try to make sure that the first story is totally gripping, irresistible, and it ends after that 10%. So that you are part of the way in it and you're like, darn, I have to spend the $5.99 to get the rest of it. And then hopefully you'll think it's brilliant and read the rest of the stories and like them too.
Yeah, it's an expert use of the sample. Like I have in the past attempted to calibrate a sample to end at an interesting point in the story, but handling percentage with formatting and all that stuff just never meshed with my brain.
Well, it's true. It's very hard to do. And I'm not always successful with it. But if you make them long enough, you can be pretty sure. Also, we have front matter where we have a little forward. We describe the stories in little paragraphs. And that's one of the ways that the beginning, we can sort of figure the story will go longer.
Yep. All right. Well, those are my questions for this part. I'm going to hand it off to Jeff for a few more.
Alrighty. My first question actually pertains to the size of the anthologies there. I started wondering about it. When you're getting ready to create or assemble a new anthology, do you look at total number of stories or a total word count of a certain size there? What are your parameters for creating an anthology?
You guys ask the best questions. No one else has asked me these things. I do think of word length. I think my very first one was about 100,000. Others have been a little shorter than that, 100,000 words, I'm saying. And the number of authors depends upon, well, it affects the bottom line, how much cash I lay out, because even if you're only paying, $300 per author, which isn't a lot for them, if you have 10 authors versus 12 authors, that's a different payout for the producer. But usually by the time I get the stories in and I see what their word length is, because I don't have any control over that except to the extent that they stay within my parameters, usually. Authors, they can be a tricky bunch.
No comprendo.
CC. So they, CC, what I've written for you, it is very short, it is very long. So I don't know exactly what I'm going to have in terms of word length per story. And I pretty much know that, say I have invited 5 or 6 authors, and one of them might fall out, or I have not rejected a story yet, but that may come. That day may come. I have not rejected a story from one of the invited authors. My fudge factor is how many submission pieces I'm accepting. So I could accept 4 if I want a 10-story book. I could accept 6 if I want, a dozen stories in a book. And but usually the stories are kind of irresistible. And I'm like, well, I just have to find that extra, X number of dollars because this is so great. And I will say that the number of authors you have, we haven't really, we talked a little bit about promotion, but I didn't go into it deeply. The more authors you have, the more exposure you get as well. So that may well be worth your extra, X number of dollars.
Makes perfect sense. With regards to creating your anthology, have you ever created one and then started getting feedback from, say, 2 or more members of that anthology that either they're not liking the order, they're not liking each other, they don't like the other stories in there? Have you ever had to go in there and make any changes, or pretty much say, hey man, you signed up, my word is rule?
I haven't. Don't give them any ideas.
Oh, sorry. Otra vez no comprendo.
Well, the indie community, the self-publishing community is really supportive and friendly. That's kind of the ethos. And I'm not quite sure how that happened, but I'm grateful for it every day. So people help and support each other and boost each other. And, not in my anthologies, but sometimes people write stuff that isn't good. And most people just say, you go, keep working. That reviewer is stupid. No, we never say that.
Yeah, because the hidden translation there is practice makes perfect. Keep going.
Absolutely. Keep writing and you'll get better, and keep studying it and you'll get better. So I have not had any of that. No one has complained about the placement. People have said thank you when they were first or second, or, sometimes I didn't mention I put something very strong at the beginning. I also put something very strong at the end. For example, in the Mostly Murder anthology, Lawrence Block went at the end, not because his story is bad. It's, arguably the best story in the book, and certainly he's the biggest name. But I knew that people would probably read that one, and I wanted them to plug through to the end, although they might just flip to the end, and that's okay with me too, depending upon the way it works. So it's kind of like your oh gosh, my sports analogies aren't good. The hitter at the end, the anchor, the last, who's the guy, the wrap up? This is terrible. What do I mean here? The cleanup hitter, yes?
We'll go with that.
Well, what if you were playing baseball? That's the one with the small round ball, right? No, I'm kidding. I know what baseball is. But if you had 3 people on the bases, and you're the last batter, what is that called?
That's the cleanup hitter, yes.
There you go. See, I was right, and you're making fun of me. All right, then.
No, you're just asking a bunch of geeks about sports, and we're like, what are you talking about?
I haven't played baseball since back in high school. Let me think here. That is, I'm like, come on, someone else, jump in quick.
Oh, that's so funny. And here I thought you were just being smug. Yeah, so anyway, that's what you do. So you want, and you want good stories all the way through. And I have to say that I've been blessed with many good stories. So it's really, they're all good. There's not a bad one in the bunch.
Hey, we indies rock. We look out for one another. What can we say?
That's true.
All right. My final question in this category is, you've obviously seen a lot of anthologies by this point in time. What are some common mistakes that you see that could easily be avoided in other anthologies?
Well, I would say that, I mean, obviously weak stories. If you, whoops, I'm losing my plug here. If you, can you still hear me?
Oh, yeah.
If you have asked your friends, and your friends are wonderful people, but they're not very far along in their writing journey, and you say, hey, gang, let's put together an anthology, that's where I think you sometimes see those weak sales, because you might have people without a lot of notoriety and without a lot of experience. And if you have 10 stories and 2 of them are strong and the rest of them aren't, you probably won't have great sales.
Makes sense. I probably have to agree with that. Makes sense. All right, that is it for these questions in this section. Let me hand you back over to Lindsay. We can get started on the marketing.
Okay.
All right. Yes, people now want to know how to sell these books. And I just want to say for the record, I can answer any tennis question you have. That's my sport. That may be swimming because I did that in school. But anyway.
Wait,
Challenge accepted.
I know what love is in tennis.
Yes.
Love.
That's not good.
That's right. It's not good.
All right. So you've kind of already talked a little bit about your strategy in getting some bigger names in the genre to be a part of the anthology, and that helps sell them. Is there, like, other than that, what's your strategy about, as we've talked about, short stories can be kind of a hard sell. How do you get people excited and make them want to buy the anthologies?
Covers matter. It's one of the reasons that I spend money on, really good custom art covers. What I'm doing with the space opera anthologies is sort of building a brand, much as Sam Peralta did with his Chronicles. The Beyond the Stars is becoming a name that people know, and we've created a community around it. And that really branched off of all of the science fiction writers that I already knew. So that was part of it. I didn't jump in out of nowhere. I was already part of a bigger community. So those 2 things, and also these authors, some of them have big newsletter lists. We talk about people's lists, and I think that some of them have 10,000 names on a list, email addresses, or 5,000 or 15,000. And so those people can send out a newsletter, and especially we have on the anthologies that I've done, we've started with a 99-cent sale price, and pretty much anybody will drop their 99 cents to try something. So that's what we do. We get people to send out newsletters, and we try to stagger it in the first, say, 10 or 12 days when we have that 99-cent price. And you should get a lot of sales then. And that gets you hopefully up in the ranks in the science fiction anthology list. Usually we make the front page, if not, the front page happens to be, I think, the first 20 books on that list. And often we make number 8, number 7, number 2, number 1 for a while anyway. This also gets us typically on the hot new releases list, which you can stay on for a month after publication. And we've managed to do that with all of these anthologies. What was the other one I was going to say? There's always Bookbub, of course, if you can get in there. And I have done that recently with one of these. I'm not even remembering which one, but that was in the summer. And that's very competitive. I was explaining this to someone else recently. If you can get an advertisement, and she said, get an advertisement. Don't you just pay for it? Isn't that what an advertisement is? I said, no, this one you have to beg on your knees. Please let me pay you my money. But if they take you, in my experience, you usually make, and it's expensive, relatively expensive, you get 3 times that back. So it's a worthwhile investment if you can get into Bookbub. There are certainly other places that advertise as well that are much cheaper and maybe less effective, but maybe in groups they can be effective. What was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, we also launch in Kindle Unlimited. So that's the program where you're exclusive to Amazon for 90 days. I mean, you can continue to re-enlist, but one 90-day period is the minimum. And that means that I think we get, I suspect, I'm not sure it's true, you get a little bit more exposure from Amazon when you're in KU, as we call it. So those are the various tools that we use. That and just making a lot of noise on Facebook and saying, hey guys, look, we're number 2. Hey guys, yes, someone pointed out to me recently that you have to be careful if you sign up for Kindle Unlimited for that first 90 days. It's one of these, unless you opt out, you will be automatically re-enlisted. So you've got to remember to check that box. And then you have to save checking that box. They make it tricky if you want to get out of it. Now, for the space opera anthologies, we have agreed, because we had at least one author that writes for one of the Amazon imprints. She can't go outside of Amazon. So we have made them exclusive, not always in Kindle Unlimited. This is really getting very technical, but presumably the people who are watching this, are indie writers themselves and understand this lingo. So we are going to stay exclusive to Amazon, but not necessarily always in Kindle Unlimited. But with my murder mystery series, we have not agreed to do that. We are in the 90-day Kindle Unlimited period, but then we're going to go wide. And I think my 4th space opera anthology, we may do that too, but that's all in flux. And I say, we'll stay in Amazon forever, but who knows what the future will bring. So there may be different ways to do this in the future. So that's a long answer. That's what I do for marketing. And then I pray,
All right. Yeah, we've talked about Kindle Unlimited quite often on the show, so people will know exactly what you're talking about.
Sure.
So I was curious when you said that you do a flat payment instead of the royalty split, which makes sense to me. I agree for the accounting. I wouldn't want to be forever worrying about paying out 10% here and there. But do you find that there's any difference with how much the authors are willing to promote? Are they pretty good when they've already been paid and they don't necessarily care how much it earns in the end? Or
I think they are pretty good, yeah. And because they this is not a surprise to them, they know the deal, and they are in it to, especially the big names. They're very generous in helping other people that are newer to the writing business. It does, you could graph it. It sells real well, and I don't know which way my hand is going here versus the graph, but it starts to diminish over time, and then you'll have an ad and it'll jump up again. You can watch that very, very clearly on the graph. But when you settle in for the long haul, these books are still making money. And for example, I'm thinking at Galaxy's Edge, it came out at the end of August, and let's see. Yeah, so that was August 24th. I know, because it's my birthday. Makes it easy to remember. And here we are almost December 24th. December 25th is somebody else's birthday. And that was not a religious comment. Just threw that in there. So that's 4 months later, right? Am I doing that right? Yeah, and it's still selling. In fact, it's probably, it's kind of neck and neck with the Mostly Murder anthology right now.
And you mentioned you launch it at 90. Excuse me. You launch it at 99 cents. Do you then move it up to $2.99 or $3.99 after a week or two?
Yeah, after usually 10 to 12 days. And somebody told me that if you have it at a lower initial price for less than 2 weeks, that's not a problem for Bookbub. I don't know. That might be an old wives' tale. There's so much information in this business. It's hard to track it all down. Yeah, and for a while, the Beyond the Stars anthologies were higher than that. They were $5.99. I think that they are, I'd have to look, but I think they're $4.99 now. And I just moved the murder mystery series up to $3.99. I think it might be $2.99. I'm not sure. I'd have to go look. I have a lot of books on my dashboard, but the dollar here and there doesn't seem to make a big difference in how well it sells, but it does make some difference, obviously, in how much you make. So I tend to lean toward higher prices. I think that it is emblematic of some prestige and the quality of the writing That's my hope anyway.
Sure, and I imagine you're very conscious of, it sounds like you're probably laying out at least $5,000 by the time you pay the authors and get a cover artist, and I assume maybe you have an editor too, or I don't know if you do that
Yeah,
yourself.
I do usually have an editor. I edited the mystery series, the mystery anthology myself, just to kind of get it off to a good start and to have, my hands on the stories. It's not always that much, that $5,000, but it's in that range. Yeah. And so it takes a while to earn that back. This is an investment. I like to think of this as my retirement fund, but you have to keep putting out books just like a regular author in order to keep the name out there and to keep people aware of it. If you totally ignored them, then they would just drop off, I think. And you need to keep trying for advertisements. There are other things that people do. Other people have occasionally on newsletters or contests are looking for books that they can pull in, and you can give your book as prizes. So ways to keep it in the public eye. I think that it's a challenge across the board as we as indie writers have gotten more and more professional. Our editing is great, and our formatting is great, and our covers are great, and we're writing wonderful stories. And so there's just a bigger and bigger pool of good books to read. And that's why a lot of it depends upon human contact and the connection to an author or group of authors. If people feel like they know you, that's fun for them and fun for the author. And if people are, kind of getting into the group thing of being part of your community, then that will help sell books for you.
Definitely. And you mentioned that the authors, many of them have mailing lists. Do you also, as a publisher, are you putting together a mailing list so that you can say, we've got a new Beyond the Stars, here it is?
Yes, exactly. I have to say that my mailing list is not as big as some of the authors that I, have included, but it's growing. And that puts me, I have to keep my mailing list straight, The mystery people may not want to know about the sci-fi and vice versa, but it's actually, fortunately, very easy to do that with all the tools that we have these days. So yes, I have a number of lists.
Okay, and it sounds like it's a good idea to stick to, like you're doing all the same title, kind of a similar anthologies each year. Do you think that's been important in succeeding, instead of just kind of maybe here's dolphin themed science fiction and here's Martians over here?
I absolutely think so. I mean, and I've stuck to the same thing more than a lot of other people have, but you need to have some kind of branding. Just as authors of regular novels, we've found that you'll sell more if you're in a series, or you somehow make it clear that this is a product you can count on. This is kind of like the one you read before that you enjoyed, but not so much like it that it's not worth paying for again. I see it as buying, I don't know, Tide detergent or whatever detergent people are buying these days, or Crest toothpaste. It's an imprimatur of quality, and or not even, I mean, hopefully it's quality too, but an indicator of what the content is. So you're going to get something that you can count on, that's worth spending your money on. And you also, as I said, in terms of the authors, you feel like you're part of a community. It's like, oh, that's cool, I read that book, I mean, and one of the people that is one of the best examples of that, of course, is Hugh Howey. He has, he's a fascinating character, and he pretty much chronicles his life when he gets the chance on Facebook, so people see. He's now sailing around the world. And last seen, I think he was in Cuba. I don't know where he is this very second, but he is somebody that is a personality and has attracted followers. And of course, his book, especially the Wolf series and ensuing books have been huge. But that's part of what you're creating here, is this sense of friendship and connection, and people like that. And that's probably as important to them as the content of the books sometimes.
Very good points. All right. And I'll agree too when I send out newsletters, and it's always nice to hear back from people that they feel like you're talking to them and you're sharing a little bit of your life, not just, oh, here's a new book, please buy it.
Yes.
All right.
And I think that's absolutely what does it. I wanted to mention something else if we still have a little bit of time. I'm talking about anthologies, as you know, that are short stories and different authors. But of course, there are anthologies that are just one author. I keep meaning to put some of my own short stories together, and as soon as I get a moment to breathe, I'm going to do that. But there are also what I'm sure your audience knows, because they're mostly writers themselves, but what we call box sets. And they can be, again, one author or a bunch of authors. In fact, I'm going to be part of, whoops, I'm losing my thing here. Part of a really exciting box set. I think it's coming out next June, but it might be July. So way off in 2017, but it's already for pre-order. And it's called Dominion Rising. I sure hope I'm getting that right. It's 20, or is it 22? I think it's 22. Science fiction and fantasy books. I'm not putting this together, but I'm going to have a novel in it. She says, knocking on wood. I was going to knock on my computer, but you probably hear that. I have to write that novel. I've started it, but it is not complete. So, but that's going to have 22 full-length novels, and all first time, So this is a way to, of course, create some synergy with all of these authors, some of which are very well known. And but that's in contrast to anthologies. That's the only reason I'm mentioning it, not so much to plug it, although thank you for letting me get that plug in. The contrast is that it's full-length novels and they're all put together. We call those box sets, but that's our sort of terminology. The other thing, and I'm just going to show you this because it's kind of interesting to see. One of my Cozy Mystery authors is, I don't know if you can see it, Geraldine Dufresne. Here's the front. And she has 6 books out now, which are very cute, as I said, cozy mysteries. And I show you that because that's 3 books in one. So I put them together, and it's called, were you just talking to your doggie there?
Yes, she was scraping at her bed and making noise. So
oh, I
trying
didn't
to
hear
get her
it.
to hush.
I was like, I hope your husband's not on the floor there. So yes, that's 3 books in one. And that's, again, what we call a box set, and not, I don't call it an anthology because it's full-length novels. Anyway, so enough with my plugging. But anyway, those were good examples of what an anthology is not.
Yeah, I've been in some of those, and I've done some of my own books 1 through 3, and they're great for getting Bookbub ads. Not the multi-author ones. They won't take the novel-length ones for some reason. They will take anthologies. But sometimes if you've got your box set for $9.99 and drop it to 99 cents for their ad, they seem to be excited when there's a big discount. So yeah. Sometimes that works better than just if you're having trouble just getting one book accepted. Yeah,
that's exactly what we did with this book, that Triple Trouble. And now we have a second collection of 3, which is Triple Trouble 2. And but that hasn't gotten a Bookbub yet, and probably because it doesn't have the first book in the series, and they seem to like first books in series. So yeah, all these little tricks that you learn over time.
Definitely. Well, let me see if the guys have a few more questions here before we sign off.
Yep. I just have 2 relatively quick questions. One of them, you were talking about how you sort of balance big names with new talent, and when you do when you're choosing authors for a thing, like, is there benefit aside from helping out the community to have new and up and comers, or like, is it worth trying to put together like a murderer's row of the best authors you can get and just stack the odds like that?
Probably you would sell better if they were all big names. Yeah. I would say that it balances out because those big names usually don't need you. And as you say, it's not a lot of money. They kind of do it for fun, for a little bit of exposure, for the good of the community, to kind of stretch their wings if they're involved in some big series, or they're doing some heavy novel, maybe they have some fun idea. So it's a little contrast in their own work schedule. But it can be hard for them to find the time, even if it's a short story, that can take a while. So I would say it would be difficult to stack it with totally heavy hitters. And I haven't really tried to do that, because sometimes between you and me, the fresh talent can have some of the best stories, and your socks are knocked off by somebody you never heard of. And that's really exciting. So I love that part of it. I like nurturing talent. And, when one of them writes a big novel and gets it made into a movie, I want them to be on that Oscar stage saying, "And thank you to Patrice Fitzgerald, who gave me my start." And I'll say, "You're welcome."
Yeah, that's definitely a good goal. I was actually thinking about how like every book is sort of like a lottery ticket. It's a phrase I've used a lot, and particularly because they could always pay off at any point in the future. Someone could just discover your book, and like there are comics who have shown off like lists of people who performed on a single night, and all of them became superstars. But at the time, none of them were superstars, and it's like the people in that audience sort of won the lottery in seeing these superstar talents. And an anthology is a good opportunity to be like, man, you'd never believe who I was in an anthology with, or who was in that anthology.
Yeah, it's true. Well, I have a friend that he was an undergrad when I was a graduate student studying opera at a local school here. And I was supposed to be in a scene with him, but it didn't work out. Although he did come to my house, he actually helped me move, and I knew him pretty well for a while. And now he's singing at the Metropolitan Opera, and there's a book about him, in fact. And he's also in Vienna performing, and he's been in Texas. He's becoming and he was in the New York Times. He's kind of the darling of the opera world right now. And I'm like, I knew that guy. That guy helped me clean out my refrigerator.
Yeah, it
So
turns out these are real people.
exactly. And I have definitely seen that in the very early days of the Wool fanfic, before Kindle Worlds existed. One of the people that I interacted with, and he's still a friend, he's this wonderful guy, very talented, Jason Gurley. And he's written lots of different things, but he's written a book that was picked up by, I'm forgetting the traditional publisher, but a big name, and he's sold it in various countries. So he's kind of a big deal now. And of course, Hugh Howey, when he started, he was just a regular guy. He is still a regular guy.
All right, just one more question. You talked a little bit about how you like submit the short stories for an award. Are there any other sort of like marketing benefits, like awards that are only open to anthologies, or marketing opportunities that are only open to anthologies?
There probably are, and I have not really explored them. I would say that there are still some barriers to self-published writing, where I think they're concerned about getting, a lot of junk. And I saw something recently where I was all gung-ho and I was going to submit something, and it said no self-published works. So I think that that bears more exploring on my end, because it would be great to be able to have one of these stories or a whole book recognized, because I think they're totally worthy.
Yeah, somebody had the comment they made was whatever, Leaves of Grass, I think, was self-published, and the guy was specifically saying, well, these books aren't Leaves of Grass. Well, you don't know that because you haven't read them.
Right.
Leaves of Grass
Yeah.
wasn't Leaves of Grass until it was Leaves of Grass.
Oh, there's tremendous history. I mean, people argue about it, but Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, who wrote most of his big books right here in Hartford, was self-published. And some people will dispute that, saying, no, he set up a publishing company and he put his nephew in charge of it. But, that was he was financing it himself. And he said, I'll give you a job because you're my son-in-law. So, or nephew or son-in-law, I'm not sure which. So he was self-published. I mean, and these are his biggest books. And through the years, many, many people that we now accept as having written classics have been self-published, because there didn't always used to be, traditional publishers in this same way. The business has changed.
Yep. All right. Well, that's all I got. So I'm going to hand you off to Jeff for a few more, and then we'll wrap things up.
Alrighty. You mentioned earlier that you actually use Facebook, and you even set up a Facebook group. I started wondering, is do you have that as a prereq for like some of your authors that want to be involved in your anthology? You got to tell them like, okay, this is what I typically do. I set up Facebook group for this. Do you ever have any author that's actually forced to jump on a social platform if they're not presently a member of it?
I hadn't really thought of that. They kind of know me through Facebook typically. So that's kind of where I am, way too many hours of the day. And so they probably wouldn't otherwise contact me unless somebody had given them my email. They could, because I have a lot of email addresses, and one of them is on my website. So yes, somebody could write me and I could say, oh, well, this is kind of the way we do it. But there's no rule that says they have to. If they don't want to be on Facebook or in that group, they could say, just let me know when you're accepting submissions, and I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering, like, you're talking to like a new author for the first time. It's like, okay, here's what we do. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to have. You need to have accounts with this, and have the author going, oh, okay, let me write this down, everything I need to do here. So I was curious about that. But okay, my second question's already been answered. Let's go to my third and final. And one I like asking clients and friends and authors. If you knew then what you know now, is there anything you would have done differently back when you first started writing?
Wow. Yeah, I would have written more faster, and I would be writing more now. I spend a lot of time producing these, which gives me great pleasure and also makes me money. But I would probably be making more money if I were writing all my own stuff, especially because it's interesting. This is kind of, this has given me some notoriety. And I do have some of my own books out, and certainly some of my short stories, but not as many as I might have otherwise. So I should be cashing in on this. I should have just done more sooner. In fact, I started self-publishing in 2011, sort of saying, my friends asked me, maybe in 2009, 2010, when it was in its infancy, why don't you publish it yourself? And I'm like, oh no, that's the death knell for if you want to be a real writer, real publishers won't accept you. But that was before I understood the finances of it, that you can make far more money as an indie writer. You can make far more money as an indie writer if your books sell. If your books don't sell, you don't make any money. But the difference is, as a self-published person, you can publish it tomorrow. You don't have to run the gauntlet of query letters to agents, getting accepted by an agent, having an agent send it to a publisher, having a publisher accept it, getting it into the stores and hoping that people buy it. It's at the very least a 2-year process, and you make far less money. So your chances are better with independent publishing. But I don't have to tell you this. The people who are listening to you probably know all of that. I have a question though. Can I ask you a question, Jeff?
Fire away.
Is that alcohol on the shelf behind you? What are
Okay, okay, let me explain. That is booze up there, but that is for my dad. No, he's not an alcoholic either, but if I were to grab one of those bottles, they're all the same exact bottle, and there's even a case of them down on my bottom shelf. It's a John Wayne Duke Spirits bottle is what it is. The only reason he wants it is got a picture of John Wayne on it. And in Idaho, where he lives, Idaho has very strict laws about shipping alcohol through the mail. You're not allowed to do it. So I made the mistake of showing him that in my grocery store down here, they've got these things. I know he's a John Wayne fan. He's like, oh my God, you need to buy me a bunch. I'm like, yeah. So now I've got the people at the grocery store thinking I need to check into an AA chapter meeting here, because every time they're like, dude, another one, really? I was like,
do they ever get drunk? I mean, do you ever drink them? Does he ever drink them?
No, I guarantee you, he will not. He's not a drinker either. He will not open that bottle at all. He'll collect them. He'll probably sell them to friends of his. I don't know.
Wow, that's so interesting. Okay, well, I have a question for Joe.
Yes.
Joe, that eyebrow of yours.
Yes.
Is your right eyebrow. See,
That's over here.
Yes, there you go. See, now people are going to have to tune in and come right to the, I don't know whether it's the 56th minute or whatever it is, to see your eyebrow. Well, it's very compelling.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I have been singled out for the raised eyebrow in the past. It is involuntary.
Yeah, it's very effective.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going around looking at all your pictures here. It's kind of fun. Now that we're almost at the end, I think I've got the hang of it. Did you all say you were going to sing me a song?
I'm sorry, I'm breaking up here. It's just bad internet
I think
connection.
it was the other way around. All right, now I'm watching Joe's eyebrows. I suppose we should wrap up the show. I was curious though about, you mentioned kind of not being sure if you should submit some of things because they're self-published to awards and such. But since you are publishing them and you're not the author, doesn't that kind of make you a publisher?
Oh, definitely. Yes, yes. In this case, in the case of the anthologies, they are, quote unquote, you can't see me, I'm doing air quotes, published by someone else. My umbrella publishing company, because I thought, when I was going to be rich and famous, and I guess I am sort of rich, sort of famous, I called it E. Fitzgerald Publishing, like electronic Fitzgerald Publishing, little e. But I usually do a kind of an imprint name under that. I think I should know, the anthologies are Astral Books, and the Mostly Murder anthologies are, what did I call it? Elemental Press, I think. I just make these things up. Don't tell anybody. It's all a big fiction. So anyway, what was my point? I was saying, yes, they are published by other people or by a publisher, and so they are not considered self-published. That is correct.
All right, because I was thinking when you mentioned 5 cents a word that you're actually paying pro rates, at least the last time. It's been a while since I looked at short stories and stuff. So if somebody got a story in one of your anthologies, maybe it would qualify. I think you'd need 3 short story sales to make it to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association.
Yes, exactly. In fact, I'm a member of that. But they only recently, I guess it was just last year, opened it to self-published writers. I mean, this is, as you point out, different than being in one of my anthologies. And I think that they were very surprised to find out how much indie writers were making, because we made their thresholds. I think it's 3 short stories in a year, or 1, and you have to have made, I want to say, like $1,000 in a year, and that a lot of indies, have crossed that threshold.
Yeah,
without
definitely.
too much trouble. So yeah, we're in there now, and so yeah, I can submit all of these to any contest because they are not considered self-published.
All right, very cool. And you've already been answering this question, but do you have any parting advice for anybody that's thinking of putting together their own anthology?
I would say do it, but make sure that you have gathered a group of people that are in a position to promote it so that it will float, because, and especially your first one, if you just, and there are people who do it for charity, et cetera, and everybody just contributes their story, those tend to kind of disappear too, unless you really keep the fires burning all the time. So you can't just kind of make it out of thin air. You need to have a game plan, and you need to have a community that's going to support it.
All right, it sounds like good advice. Is there anything else that you'd like to plug or mention again before we let you go?
I just want to say thank you. This has been fun. You've made it very easy, and it's been fascinating to get a glimpse into your writing and or recording spaces, because I've seen the eyebrow, I've seen the alcohol, and I see your little stuffed animals back there, Lindsay.
Those are things that readers made for me that have significance to my books, little dolls of my characters and things.
Patrice, when you get a chance, ask Lindsay about her kraken. It's not visible yet on the screen, but there's been
isn't it over there, the pink thing on the top shelf?
Oh, I thought that was a penguin or something. I didn't know what that was.
A lot of people have thought it was an adult toy. Very large. It's a kraken, because I've had krakens in a couple books.
Yeah, if I get singled out for the booze, you better believe I'm going to single out that kraken, let me tell you.
Well, when you said you have to ask her to show us her kraken, I was like, where are we going with this?
It's now 11 p.m. or 10 p.m. on the East Coast. Naughty hours have begun.
Well, it's been lots of fun, and thank you for having me.
All right, thanks for all the info. It's nice meeting you, Patrice.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for listening, everyone. If you want to come by the show, I will link to Patrice's books and her website in the show notes. It's episode 112, marketingsff.com. Come on by, leave a comment if you want. We'd love to hear from you.
Take it easy.
So long, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.